Hello, folks. I am here with Guinevere Brickman, and we are ready to complete our next Career Day interview. I'm very excited to introduce you to Tracy Young. So, Tracy Young, if you could please tell us what your job or career is.
Yes, so I'm Tracy Young, and I am a milliner, which is a fancy name for making hats. And obviously, many years ago, everyone wore hats, men, women, and children. And that has changed a little bit over time, but there are still plenty of people that wear hats to kind of make a statement, protect themselves from the cold, and I make them from scratch.
What steps did you need to take to get to where you are now?
My path was very circuitous, so I did not grow up thinking that I wanted to make hats and be a milliner. But what I did was, sometimes I like to think of myself as an entrepreneur. And so I have my own business, and I think many students along the way will be faced with this decision of, are they interested in starting a business? So my path was a traditional in the sense that I went to business school, I received an MBA, and then I started working for large companies in the marketing arena and so forth. From there, over time, I kind of decided that working at large corporations was wonderful, but it wasn't quite in keeping with my needs at the time. I was a mother, I had 2 young children, and the hours in a corporate environment were not very flexible. So through a series of events, I started my own business. At first, it was with party dresses, and I was selling through trunk shows as well as online. And then over time, that evolved into a different type of business because of the way that people were purchasing. And then I had an opportunity to learn how to make some First Communion veils, which is what my business had evolved into. And from there, I fell in love. I started taking classes at FIT. So again, recognizing that there were some skills that I needed, a skill set that I needed to learn, I went back to school. I received a certificate in millinery. From there, once I had completed my certificate, which was 2 years, I then apprenticed under a couple of other milliners, both here in Hudson as well as abroad and some on Long Island, and then decided to open my own shop. So kind of very, again, circuitous, with an understanding that I was self-taught in some areas, but then also looking at how education and a more structured certificate program could benefit me.
Thank you. If you could walk us through a typical day in your field of work, what might that look like?
So I would say I'm constantly doing multiple things. So there isn't one thing that goes on at one specific time. So for example, I am working on a collection that I'm going to be probably introducing around May or June. So there's a lot of research that goes into it. I need to pick a theme and start thinking about the fabrics that I want to, and what are some of the steps that I'm going to need to do. I also have clients that will come in and they will order a hat. So for example, I'm working on one right now. And let's see if I can move it over here without it falling apart because it is not quite all sewn together. So let's see if I can get this. So this is a very large feather hat, kind of like 1950s there. And it's needed for an event that will be happening, for a fashion shoot that's going to be happening probably in April-ish. So I need to work on that and have that happening at the same time. Then another thing that I'm working on is I just finished delivering 4 hats for a client. So in fact, I had a meeting with the client. She wanted 1 or 2 minor tweaks. I made those to the hats, and we had several fittings over time. So this process for all 4 hats probably took about 2 to 3 months, and I just delivered those yesterday. So what happens is I'm constantly planning for the future and thinking about what are some of the things that I need to get done, and looking at it like in quarters. So first quarter of the year, second quarter of the year, third quarter, trying to plan out what I need to do in order to be able to make the hats. And then other things are happening. It's tax season. So I then need to handle the bookkeeping. So for the past week, then I needed to make sure that all of my bookkeeping was up to date so I could then send it over to the accountant, which is kind of a long-winded way of every day is unique. But what I try to do is keep an eye focused on what needs to be accomplished in the short term or the medium term, and then just ensure that that keeps going.
What do you love the most about your job?
The creativity involved, and sometimes that can be very frustrating because you've got a concept, or I have a concept in my head of what I want to actually produce, and because I'm working with materials, it's like kids, they don't always do what you want them to do. I think many teachers would say that. So I need to be flexible, and I need to be able to modify things as they're happening and so forth.
Thank you. So you touched on this a bit. I'm wondering, there could be kids who selected this video because they're perhaps interested in heading into the fashion industry, or really are just interested in the creative aspect of your job. And I'm wondering, what skills might you suggest, or what skills do you feel are needed to do this job well? And while some of them might be soft skills, others could be more trainable, like you had mentioned earlier. But in general, what do you feel are the most important skills to do this job well?
I think motivation is really, really important. And I'll talk about each one of them. So I would say, motivation, a certain amount of inquisitiveness. So the ability to think about things and adapt it to the business. Motivation, a love for fashion, okay? Because at the end of the day, this is a fashion item. It's an accessory, and you want it to look good so the wearer feels fabulous when they're wearing it. So now let me talk a little bit about each part, or each one of those. I would say internally motivated is really important, because no one taps me on the shoulder other than my accountant at tax time to really remind me of, okay, these are some of the things that are coming up. These are some of the things that I want to do. Being an entrepreneur is wonderful in the sense that it gives me a lot of flexibility with my schedule. So if I need to go into New York City, let's say, in order to source fabrics or something, then my shop is mostly by appointment, and I designed it that way intentionally so that clients would make appointments, and that would give me the flexibility for my schedule. Otherwise, if I were a more traditional retailer, I would have to probably hire someone, and there would be an expense associated with it, to make sure that my company was open all the time. But because of the way people buy hats, I'm allowed to do that. All right. So going back to kind of being internally motivated, that if I'm going to make a collection, I need to do that. And what I do is I give myself a deadline and then work towards that. So every year I find it can be very helpful to map out what I want to accomplish in the next year to kind of ensure that I'm moving the business forward. So when you're not internally motivated, then you might not get it done because there are too many distractions in the world and there are too many reasons not to do it and everything else. So that really is critical. The other thing, I think, creativity, I talked about, because you want to be current enough with fashion so it doesn't feel has been, old-fashioned, outdated. When I'm creating a hat, I can make something that is vintage inspired. So for example, the feather hat is based on a 1950s Christian Dior hat and silhouette that went with it. But my task is to take and make it modern. So right now in the marketplace, I'm seeing tons of polka dots. So one of the things that I will tie in, let's see if I can get this, is that the lining and the underside of this hat is using a polka dot theme for that to try to keep it relevant and so forth. And then the other thing, what was the second one that I said?
I think you said to be inquisitive.
Inquisitive, because what happens is there's so many new things happening, and many times I have to learn them, and so I have to kind of figure it out. And because I am an entrepreneur, then I don't have the corporate structure to go to either my IT department or to farm it out to someone else and say, here, you handle this for me. So I need to be able to be inquisitive enough to figure things out. And I think that that is something that is critical if you want to be an entrepreneur. And that is something for anyone watching this. Ask yourself, do you really like to figure things out, or do you prefer to be in a more structured environment where you will always have to figure things out, but there's more support that's provided, whereas entrepreneurs have to find their support. If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. All of the skills that you mentioned to me sound very active. You know, those are very active skills. You need to be willing to kind of put yourself out there to do that. Whereas other skills might be kind of a given or something that someone is strong at, but maybe someone else is directing them to do. So I think you nailed it. Thank you.
Wonderful. And there are many, many more skills, but I think that those are the ones that have really served me best. And not to be afraid of failing. I've launched things that have been absolutely horrible, and horrible in the sense that no one buys them. So you keep going and you put it out there, you put yourself out there. And if it's not working, then I start asking questions. I'm always trying to find out why. Okay, so do I need to tweak it? Or do I need to just kill it, drop it, and move on?
What are some challenges that you face in your job?
I think one of the challenges is to be fiscally responsible. So, for example, I have a concept that I am in the process of launching. I just launched it. It's a do-it-yourself veil. And with wedding veils, they're very expensive because of the time involved in actually sewing them. And so I created a kind of do-it-yourself concept that whereby either a loved one, a grandmother of a bride, could make a wedding veil for the bride, or the bride could, a do-it-yourself bride could make it for herself and try to save money. Now, the concept of what I want to do is I have at least 10 different videos and types of veils that I would like to do. But the reality is I need to start selling one concept, and I created and worked with a company to create a professional video for it and so forth. And like I said, to be fiscally responsible, to do it in such a way that it can grow and grow and grow. So my idea is, I want to be here, but I have to start here and to build it. So I think any entrepreneur is faced with that you have tons of great ideas. And so how can you do it in such a way that is fiscally responsible, that you can figure out how to do it small enough that once it achieves momentum, that it can grow and grow.
Thank you. So we're very lucky that we have a wonderful backdrop to look at right now of your hat shop, which leads us into the next question in terms of what is your work environment like?
Yes, so I will pan a little bit to show you my shop. So I'm located in Hudson on Warren Street, which is the main street in Hudson. And there are a lot of small boutiques and creative shops. So here, what I did with my hat shop is, let's see if we can get a little more lighting. And if you can kind of see it. Okay, you got lots of lighting with me.
Oh, but I think that was really nice. That'll give us a good view, and there'll be pictures included as well. It's beautiful.
Right. And what I did with it is, because my hats are much more artistic, I tried to set up my retail environment to feel more like a gallery than just going in for a hat shop. Like if you think about, let's say you're looking for a baseball cap for a sports team, you go in and there's just row and row and row of all these hats. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to say, no, when I create a hat, it is truly one of a kind. And similar to art, in that when someone creates a painting or a sculpture or something like that, use that type of environment, create that type of environment, because it sends a subliminal message to the person who comes in. And part of the subliminal message is the price points. My hats are not $30 hats. While I have hats that start at $99, they go up to $2,000. And I have sold $2,000 custom hats. So it's a different mindset, and it was really important to create an environment that matches the product being delivered.
What are the salary ranges for various levels in this field, and would you say that there are opportunities for advancement in salary or position?
So salary is a little bit different when you're an entrepreneur. Most businesses take 5 years to really turn a profit and on an ongoing basis so that you can pull a salary. So when you first start out, you're pouring all the profits that you make back into your business. Not all businesses, but many small businesses. So you don't really pull a salary for that. So one of the things that many entrepreneurs do is they have a second job, and that's the reality of that. So they may start their business while they have another stable income. And then once they're able to sustain sales on an ongoing level or an ongoing basis, that you can start pulling a salary, then you can do it. An entrepreneur could go from $1 to 10 million. It really is, there are many, many possibilities. It's a lot of hard work and kind of the mental gymnastic. Now, one of the things I will say is that there's something called, when you physically make a product, you reach a limitation on how many you can make because there are only so many hours in the day. So if you truly want to grow the business, you have to think a little bit outside of the box, in that, are there things that I could sell that I don't have to make? Okay. Or if I make it once, can I then sell it 100 times? And that was part of the reason for doing the do-it-yourself fail. Because once I make the video once, then I can hire someone for the kits, and I created the kits, but I could hire someone to actually sit and cut and stack them and mail them. But the rest of the information becomes turnkey, so people can just buy it. And that's truly where you can make big money.
Thank you. So our final question for you, there are students watching this in middle school and in high school, and kind of just wondering, were there any classes when you were a high school student or a middle school student that you took that you feel relate to your career now, so that someone watching it might think to themselves, well, maybe I'll take a class in that subject? Is there anything that you would recommend?
Yes, there are two actually that come to mind. So the first one, because this is fashion, I would encourage everyone to take several courses in art related. So whether visual arts, whether it's photography, introduction to art, because what it is doing is training your eye. It's training your eye to look at something in a specific way that for fashion you do need. Okay. And then the other thing is, I would say, a business course, because if you can understand how accounting works, how you get sales, and the different components, then it just makes your life easier. Because really, with being an entrepreneur, you've got to be left brain, right brain, and especially in the beginning. You know, eventually you can hire people, but in the beginning, you're doing everything.
Well, thank you. I think that makes perfect sense. That wraps up our questions. I want to thank you so much for your time. I want to thank you, Guinevere, for helping us to conduct this Career Day interview. Thank you so much for giving your time to talk about your career.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And it is so rewarding. And I love it, and I wouldn't do anything else. So if you have an entrepreneurial bug and you're watching this, go for it.